Howdy, friend, and welcome to your favorite preacher podcast, your favorite preacher show. In fact, this is the very first one. I did the introduction a few days ago, and I know several people watched it, and several people told me when I was talking with them about it, they liked it, they were looking forward to the show. Well, today is the first show, something I have looked forward to. Today is Monday, February 3rd. It's a beautiful day. It's about, in fact, 3:14 p.m. It's a beautiful day. It's almost like spring outside. In fact, it's like a warm spring day. And it's just gorgeous outside. Today is such a blessing. God has blessed us with a beautiful day. And I'm looking forward to many more of these shows, but this is the very first one. And I got the idea for today's show from a movie that I have been watching, and I made some notes because I wanted to make sure I got all the facts straight. The movie is titled Five Last Days, and it's based on events that supposedly took place in Germany, in Munich, Germany, during World War II. According to the information that I have been able to research, three people, two boys and a girl, all young people. The girl, I think, was 22 years old. She and her brother, her name is Sophie Scholl. Her brother's name is Hans, and then they had a friend. But what they did was they grew to hate what the Nazis stood for, and Adolf Hitler particularly. So they began to print up these documents, leaflets. They called them leaflets. They printed them up, and they printed off thousands of them, and they started passing them around to all of their college friends. Well, eventually the German secret police, found out what was happening, and they were arrested. These three people, Sophie, her brother Hans, and another man. And they were taken to what we would call the police headquarters in Munich, secret police, Gestapo. And they were eventually put on trial and found guilty. Well, as a result of that, they were all going to be put to death. What was interesting, though, about that was all three of them confessed before they ever went to trial. They all three confessed, claiming that they were the only person responsible, hoping that the other two would be set free. Well, of course, because they all three confessed, they ended up all being found guilty, and they were all going to be sentenced to death. Well, this movie, Five Last Days, is really about the last 5 days of this young girl's life, Sophie Scholl. And the movie talks about what she stood for and why she did what she did. And it's just an incredible movie. I can't really explain it to you. You just have to watch it for yourself. It's the kind of movie I love. I've watched it several times. I'm so moved by it. I really love it. And especially this young girl. She became known, I think her name was the White Rose, and the leaflets became known as the White Rose leaflets. And when she was being interviewed by the Gestapo agents, after she had confessed, they tried to convince her that she was wrong in what she was doing. But she stood her ground. She said the Nazis are doing terrible things. They're killing Jewish people by the thousands. Innocent people all over Germany are dying. Hundreds and thousands of young German soldiers are dying needlessly. And Hitler is just a terrible human being. He's doing terrible things. He's taking Germany down to ruins. And she stood her ground. They all three did. And eventually they were all three put to death. But after they were found guilty, this agent asked her, he said to her, now that you've been found guilty and you are going to be sentenced to death, Knowing what you know now, would you do it over again? Would you do the same thing again? And she said, there's nothing that I would change. I would do it all the same. She said the reason why is because of her conscience. She had to do what she believed was right. And she ends up dying. And she is such a strong person of character that even some of those Nazis, those Gestapo agents, who were hardened people, many of them were hardened people, they were actually moved by this person, Sophie's commitment to doing what she was convinced was right. They were so impressed with her that they hated to have to see her die. But she did. When I think about this person, Sophie, her brother Hans, and this other fellow, I think about people who lived with a purpose. She did not mind dying, apparently. I think she wanted to live. I feel sure she wanted to live, but she didn't mind dying. And the reason why was because she lived with a purpose and she died with a purpose. Her whole life stood for something. And I was thinking to myself, that's really what Christianity is all about. If you really understand Christianity, it's being able to live with a purpose. I think about the great Apostle Paul. And by the way, before I forget about it, at the end of the movie, the last day of Sophie's life, she was reading the Bible. And she read the Bible all through this movie. She was a very devout Christian young woman. She was a committed Christian, a follower of Jesus. And she, at the end of this movie, before she was put to death, she was reading this passage, which happens to be one of my favorite Bible passages. It's found in Romans chapter 8, verse 18. The great apostle Paul said, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory that is to be revealed to us." Think about that, friend. That sums it up. Sophie believed that whatever she had to suffer as a result of her experiences and death wasn't anything in comparison to what the Lord had in store for her. And the Apostle Paul felt the very same way. And all of us who are Christians should feel the very same way. When I think about people like Sophie, of course, the Apostle Paul comes to mind. The Apostle Paul was one of those unusual men. Paul summed up his life, for example, in Galatians chapter 2. In Galatians chapter 2, beginning with verse 20, the Apostle Paul said, "I have been crucified with Christ," meaning I have died. My life is dead and gone. "I have been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself up for me. I do not nullify the grace of God, for if righteousness comes through the law, then Christ died needlessly." But for the Apostle Paul, Christ did not die needlessly. Because for the Apostle Paul, he said his whole life was summed up by his faith in Jesus. In fact, Paul said in Philippians chapter 1, it'll take me just a moment to get to it, but in Philippians chapter 1, again, I think the Apostle Paul summed up his life in Philippians 1:21, when Paul said, "For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." For the Apostle Paul, he said, my whole life is about Jesus. He is my purpose for living. I live for him. I live to do his will. And he said, when I die, I haven't lost anything. I haven't lost my life. I have found my life. I have gained my life. For me To live as Christ and to die as gain. I think about what Paul said to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 4, beginning with verse 6. He said, "For I am already being poured out as a drink offering, and the time of my departure has come." Paul said the time of his departure had come. What did he mean by that? He's about to check out of this old world. Paul, he's in a Roman prison when he wrote 2 Timothy. And he's been found guilty of whatever, treason, I guess. And now he's going to be put to death because of his faith in Jesus, because he will not renounce his faith in Jesus. For him, Caesar is not king, Jesus is king. And Paul said, the time of my departure has come. I'm about ready to leave this world for whatever is next. But I want you to notice what Paul said. He said, I have fought a good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith. Paul said, I've done what I was supposed to do. I haven't earned anything. Paul's not claiming to have earned anything, but he said, I've been faithful to the end. I have done what I was supposed to do as a believer. And as a result of that, he said, in the future, whenever the great judgment day comes, in the future there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the righteous judge will award to me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have loved his appearing. Paul said sometime in the future, when the great day comes, he'll stand before a righteous judge this time, unlike those Roman officials who sentenced him to death, unlike those Gestapo agents who sentenced Sophie to death. This time, Paul said, I'll stand before the righteous judge, Jesus the Lord, and he will give me the crown of righteousness. And on that day, I'll be able to have everything. I think about all the people who are living today, and I think in my mind about people such as homeless people. I don't know those people. But I think about people, and I think about people that I have known and people I do not know. Drug addicts. I have known drug addicts in my life. I have visited with drug addicts. And I think about those people. And I actually feel sorry for them. I feel sorry for them because they're living their lives without a purpose. They have no reason for existence. Maybe that's the reason why they're drug addicts. Maybe that's the reason why they've allowed their lives to be what it is. Well, what those people need, what all people need, is a purpose. And you know what the greatest purpose is? The greatest purpose in the world is living for Jesus. And as a result of that, you get to be saved by him. He, through his sacrifice on the cross, he saves you from your sins. And as a result of your faith in Jesus, not only are you able to live forgiven, you don't have to account for the sins you've committed, but you get to live with hope of the future and what the future holds on earth. God promises to be with us and bless us while we continue to live on earth. But you also get to live with hope of an eternity with the Lord. And so I hope all of you who watch this will think about what is your purpose for living. And if you happen to stumble upon this show, your favorite preacher show, hope you'll think about what your purpose is. And if you don't really think you have one, then turn to Jesus. He'll give you the greatest purpose for living. Well, that's the show for today. I hope to continue to share with you many more. I hope you'll watch it and enjoy it and be helped by it. I hope you'll like it, indicate that you like it, that you'll subscribe to the program. And finally, remember this from Psalm 118, verse 24. This is the day which the Lord hath made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. I hope that you will have a wonderful day.